Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on The Edge. I am so excited to invite and welcome my guest, William Wiggins. Hey, William, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Rayanne, how are you?
I am great. I'm so happy that you could be here today to talk about a couple of things. First
Yeah.
off, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you joining me on the premiere episode of season 4 of On the Edge. It's very exciting to have you here. I always love chatting with you, and I know you have some very exciting news. Your book was just released. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, it was. Thank you for asking. I did a book. It was a labor of love. It was a collection of previously published content with publications like HR Gazette, Fistful of Talent, Unleash AI, and I wanted to put these stories together. The book is a collection of stories. It's not your typical HR book where you read and they show you, this is how you do this, this is how you do that. I start off each story in the book with a personal story about an HR incident or something that happened that taught me how to deal with a particular subject matter. For example, with performance, I start off a story talking about employees that consistently come up, real stories where employees were coming up saying, hey, I'm haven't received a raise in a year, haven't received any feedback, and all of a sudden I'm getting a 1 for performance. And so I always tell a story, and then I ease into that is why we should do one-on-ones, or that is why we should handle it this way. And so I think that's what makes the book fun. It also tells a story about me and my HR style and my approach to managing people and the HR discipline, if you will.
And how long have you been in HR, William?
I've been in HR now for about 12 years.
12 years.
I
Okay.
started off in benefits. I was in benefits for many, many years and came over to the HR side. One day I was talking to someone and never thought I would be in HR, Rayanne, and I tell this story in the book too. Long time ago, I was called into HR for misbehaving at a conference where I rolled my eyes at something that the speaker was saying. So,
Oh, no.
and I remember when there were 2 of us, and I remember coming back from HR, which was an experience where they had you setting out. I felt like they had us sitting in a cold room, under a light. And I talked about how when we came out of this meeting, being warned about our behavior and it was going to go on our permanent record, I said to the other person, this is why I will never be in HR, because they act like the police. And here I am. And so I came over to HR because I wanted to make more of an impact. Benefits is a really, really great area. You can't beat it for making an impact, but I wanted to make more of an impact on a larger population from the work experience to make sure that the environments that we are asking our people to come to are environments that they feel like they can thrive in and that they want to be in. I think that's very important. And so I came over to HR and
I love that you did. I think we have all benefited from that. And one thing that I have learned from you is you don't have to answer immediately with your first jerk gut reaction. And because I am like that. I'm a fast thinker. I think strategically really quick and I want to blurt out an answer. And I feel like from you, I've learned, look, pace yourself, slow down, add some kindness to your words. And I always appreciate learning that from you. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before. I've never shared that with you, but I have learned a great deal from you about that, about slowing down. And because of you, I've actually added I don't do resolutions anymore, New Year's resolutions, but I pick a word for the year. And my word this year is pause. And then after pausing, speak with kindness, listen, and then speak with kindness. And so I attribute that to you and to our friendship, our relationship, the many times that we've spoken, that I've had you on this broadcast, on HR Latte, on when I did Intrepid
Yes,
HR with Dovetail, so it's been you've been a teacher for me. So I really appreciate you being here again to talk about this latest thing that has you in I don't want to say uproar, because I've never seen you in an uproar. I've seen you feisty. And I think you're feistier in writing. which is why I'm looking so forward to reading your book.
Yeah.
When you reached out to me about this forced return to work, I could tell you were heated about this, that it was something that you wanted to talk about. So let's talk about let's frame what our discussion is. There is a movement right now. Well, it's been going on for the last 6 months to a year to force employees back into the workplace, no longer working remote. So tell me a little bit about what got your dander up on this and why it's an important topic for you.
Yeah. This is an important topic for me, Rayanne, because it all goes down to employee engagement. I was in HR when the world had to adapt very, very quickly because of COVID-19. We were asking employees to do things they had never done before. We were asking HR to do things that they had never done before. I can remember the organization that I was with at the time. I can remember sitting in my office after hours doing screenshots of how you do a Zoom meeting because my recruiters were going to have to do meetings over Zoom, and the majority of them had not used Zoom for meetings before. But we asked people to adapt, and we asked them to adapt really,
Right.
really quickly, and they did so successfully. During that time, I can't believe we lived through that. In looking back, a lot of things happened. Children were not able to go to school, and that became the responsibility mostly of women to work out alternatives, to do homeschooling, to do childcare. Lots of people moved closer to their families because they just didn't know what was going to happen or what was going on. They moved farther from their central headquartered locations at work. So a lot of things happened. People made the transition willingly and successfully because companies actually enjoyed record profits during that time. We asked people to, work from home. We were asking people to, work out childcare, like all these things. And people did that, and they did it successfully. And it was proven, the proof was in the pudding, that companies enjoyed record profits during that time. And so when I look back on that period, I thought, okay, this is really, really good because it's a progressive sort of it's a progressive way to work, and we're evolving. I'm not a fan of the, work strictly from home, and I never go into the office and I don't want to see anyone. But I think there's some merit to someone working in their own space. There's data that supports when people are comfortable, when people work from home, they do well. There's also data to support that some people suffer from social anxiety and other things like that. But by and large, people work from home very, very well. And I was starting to hear a lot of excuses from. I have a friend who is a CEO for an IT-based company, and we had this big long discussion because he wanted to write an employee up that worked from home. And when they called her, she was walking her dog, but she was able to take the call and have a walking meeting. So my question to him was, well, you all have walking meetings all the time because I know that because you've talked about that before. And he goes, well, she was walking her dog, and, you never can tell what people are doing from home. And I said, so if she was at work and she left work to go home to walk her dog, over her break time or her lunch break, would that be okay? And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, why is it not okay that maybe she was doing that while she was at home? What is her productivity like? Her performance is good, but you know what? You just don't know what you just can't tell what people are doing. And I'm like, okay, so her performance is good. You said you want to write her up for walking a dog, which is something that she has every right to do, and she has a right to take a break, and she has a right to spend that break how she wants. And so I was hearing all of these excuses from, folks in the industry, managers and leaders saying, well, we want to bring people back into the office because we have this space that we're not using. Okay, you can still use the space. There are other ways that you can use the space rather than asking people or demanding that people come back to the office.
Sell the space.
Yeah, sell the space.
Lower your overhead.
Or use the space in a different way.
Yeah.
I would recommend for people that have space that they can't sell, they can't sublease. Let's use the space in a different way. Why don't we say that people have to come into the office, put some parameters around people have to come into the office when we're doing a strategy session, when we do team builders, when your manager demands that everybody need to get together for a collaborative session. Why don't we use the space in that way, put some parameters, set some expectations around when people are going to be in the office, create situations where people are going to be in the office to connect with their coworkers without penalizing everyone, including people that have adapted their lives because you said so, Mr. Employer, people that have adapted their lives and now have to be uprooted from a routine that they have managed to make very productive and profitable for them. And again, I know this does not work for everyone, and not every workspace is adaptable to a work from home situation, but I really encourage employers to think about it in a different way and try to really connect with the employee population to see, is the deal, I've heard people say, I have to be watching people you didn't watch them for nearly 2 years during COVID when we you didn't watch them then and they were profitable. So what happens now? And why are you hiring people that you don't trust or that you need to watch to do work? Let's talk about that. And so I would like for us to think about it in a different way versus everyone back to the office right now because I need to see you. And so that's what, kind of got me. I'm seeing more and more of that. I have a friend who is in the process of relocating to Seattle because her employer here is demanding that everyone is in the office for 3 days a week. Without respect to, this is someone who lives on the other side of the country, was hired based on that assumption, and now is being uprooted and told something completely different. It's just a different way of thinking about it.
And so employers are worried about performance, even though good performance is reflected in what is being produced, the work that's being produced. Mm-hmm. They're worried about the space, even though there are options for that, like you have presented, either, subletting the space if they own it, or ending the lease, or reducing the amount of space that they maintain. I think they're also worried that there is a lack of employee engagement or a lack of feeling like the team is joined. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned, which is employees feeling uncomfortable in work situations, either from a past experience that was really bad, abuse of some kind, harassment of some kind, or bullying. And I know that I have heard many women, and in particular women of color, who have felt so much more at ease in work since they've been able to work from home. Some of them have had the opportunity to work from home and haven't felt pressured or bullied in some way. So are employers not seeing that other side? They're just worried about productivity? Are they feeling like that there's not that we need to have more team time together? The story about the dog walking is ridiculous to me because when I worked in a building with several teams, there were probably 30% of the team that were smokers. And they would 4 or 5 times a day get up and leave and smoke, spend 15, 20 minutes smoking, which is great. It was allowed, right? And so those of us that weren't smokers would see that everybody outside laughing and talking, not everybody, but the 30% that were smokers, right? They would all gather in the same spot. And we started having Uno tournaments during that time. We would go, and those of us that wanted to would go into one of the meeting rooms and we would play a fast hand of Uno. And it was like throwing the cards. It was so much fun and it was great team activity. But my point of that is that we can get to know each other in different ways. We don't have to be working in a cubicle next to each other or go to the immediate understanding that you have to be sitting next to somebody or in a meeting 3 times a day, or meeting for coffee in the break room, twice a day, or whatever it is. I love that your friend enjoyed walking meetings, had that
Mhm.
as a thing. I had a employer that said, if somebody's walking, you don't talk to them because they're on their way to a meeting or they're on their way to talk to somebody, or they do not distract them. If you see them walking in the halls, do not talk to them. And it was such a strange way to think about employee engagement, or
Yeah.
so is there something else that employers are worried about?
I think it's hard to get away from our old school management styles. And I think it comes down to that. I think we need
Tradition.
to, yeah, it's tradition. I think that we need to encourage our leaders to be just a little bit more progressive, to look at the data before we make assessments. That I have another friend, an organization that says, it's just a better product when people are here. And I always say, can I see the data on that? What are you basing that on? What do you give me a situation
Right.
when he has none? And I think it comes down to just an old school sort of style of meeting people, needing to be able to see people, which in most cases, leaders are not present when people are in the office to do that, and they have not been for so long. And so I have not heard. I just not have not heard a compelling enough reason to make this sort of a national mandate, which is what I see happening, especially after we've proven that we can do something different. It's just not a progressive way of thinking. And again, I am an HR leader. I personally believe, for me, when I was strictly remote, I would go into the office because if someone needed to have a meeting with me and they said, I need to have a meeting with HR, I went into the office because that
Sure.
is what I'm
Sure.
here for. And sometimes a face-to-face meeting, when you're dealing with some of the situations that we deal with in HR, is probably best in order to be able to capture someone's emotion around something, or just be able to provide some comfort, some guidance, and some coaching. And so I get it, and I'm not saying that work strictly from office. You never have to see anyone. I'm saying maybe consider a hybrid and create situations where people are encouraged to come together. I have done that in the past, and I noticed that we had a team builder when I was working for an organization, and I called people into the office, and they squawked and they barked. And when they came into the office, it was really, really hard to get them out at the end of the day after months and months and months of not seeing their coworkers. It
Right.
was really emotional for some people. And I noticed, I'm like, it's 6 o'clock and people are still kind of hanging around, catching up. And so I think people crave that. And I'm saying we can give folks that, but we can also understand that maybe there's a different way of working that has been born out of this pandemic that we should explore a little bit more, instead of jumping back to the old ways,
Sure.
and ask ourselves, why are we doing this? How come we can't explore a different way of working? I say, here's what I always tell leaders: let's try it. Let's try even a hybrid situation, or a situation where you're creating team builder events where employees are required to be here. Let's try it for a certain period of time. If it doesn't work, if productivity dips, then we can say we tried it, it didn't work, it wasn't for our population of people. But let's give it a try and see how it's received. Also, engage the employees in the decision too. I'm a big believer in employee engagement surveys. You have people that are contributing to your bottom line for up to 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I think they deserve a voice
Right.
in what happens in the workplace. That's not something that should be decided just solely, on a group of leaders or managers in a room. I think that the employee needs to be engaged, and there needs to be some dialogue and an opportunity for them to weigh in on what they would, how
Right.
they would prefer to work.
So I've worked fully remote for 11, 12 years now.
Mhm.
And I found that working remotely, I work more. I mean,
Yes.
I wake up, my phone is in my hand immediately. I'm answering emails first thing in the morning before I've even gotten out of bed or washed my face or brushed my teeth, right? I'm answering emails on my couch in the evening,
Hmm.
right? I
Yes.
don't go from one part of the house to the other without my phone or my laptop in my hands,
Yes. Hmm.
right? So there's also that bad side of working remotely. And I can remember saying the really great thing about working remotely is that I can still work when I'm not feeling well.
Yes.
The really bad thing about working remotely is that I still work when I'm not feeling well, right? So there is the other side. So as an employee, what do you think is the negative impact of working remotely? Would it be the constantly feeling like you're constantly on,
Yes.
feeling like you have to answer emails immediately? Like, what if he hadn't known that she was walking her dog? If she just hadn't answered or said, texted back, "Hey, I'm on another call. I'll call
Would
you
have been
right
cool.
back."
She would have
It,
been golden.
right. He never would have known she was walking, but instead she was honest. She didn't hide what she was doing. She answered immediately because she felt loyal to her
Yes.
employer and said, "I'm going to answer the phone," and not make up something. There's also the idea that we creative thinkers, and a lot of people who work from home are those creative thinkers, whether they're in technology innovation, they're marketers, they're working HR and finding workarounds for different things. There's a lot to be said for removing yourself from this space because your brain needs a break, and your brain will come up with new ideas when you're folding laundry or when you're walking the dog or when you're sitting in the sun for a minute or you're going out and having a smoke. Whatever it is that takes you away from your computer. There's a lot to be said for that. And I found that I was working 10-hour days instead of 8-hour days. Right. And
Same here, Rayanne. Same here. And I think you're right. That is one of the areas that a lot of people suffer with. They don't know when to cut off the clock, which
right.
is contributing to some of that productivity that we experience, that great productivity that we experienced during COVID, which I think is something else that that's up to the manager to be able to meter, to be able to coach folks through, as is the same with someone who suffers from social isolation. It's one thing to say that's not our problem, someone go out, and get friends. But we need to understand that a lot of people's central way of building community is through work, and that doesn't have to, again, we don't have to have a situation where someone never comes into the office and never has a opportunity to connect with their coworkers.
Right.
Because we can create that as well. But I say a lot of organizations, they have the ability to, after a certain hour, no emails can be sent, or emails need to be scheduled to go out on a delayed send type of situation. And leaders need to be coached. You shouldn't be sending an email to someone at 10 because that makes people feel compelled to answer it.
Right.
And so I think that some of that can be driven by leadership as well.
Yeah, I know several people who actually can turn their email off and will walk away from their laptop by 6 p.m. and not look at it till the next day at 7 or 8 o'clock. Another thing I want to touch on, and you mentioned this, is I in one of my working situations where I was a hybrid, I was working somewhat at home, somewhat in the office, and the idea that employees had to be in the office by 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And then you had a COO that would stroll in between 10 and noon. Right. And the image that creates for employees to feel like, well, why should I have to be here when my leader, who is supposed to be supporting me and demands this of me, isn't here or is playing golf or is doing whatever he's doing, which is, he has that right. I'm not disparaging the right for an executive to do what he needs to do to continue to conduct. He was probably conducting business, but he was doing it away from the office. Okay. He didn't have to be.
And maybe he was playing golf, I mean.
Right. Well, and a lot of employers play golf and do business on the golf course. That's my point, is we all have a way to work, and it doesn't always have to be sitting at a desk with our face glued to a computer. Now, of course, there are some jobs that require, manufacturing or any other jobs that require us to be, if you're an Uber driver, you kind of have to be in a car, to be an Uber driver. If you put vehicles together, you kind of have to be in a factory to do that. So I think, of course, we're talking specifically about people who have a desk job, who are customer service, who are marketing. We don't have to go back over all of that. But so what do you think will be, before we get, I want to talk about what the ideal is, what you think the ideal would be. But before we get there, what do you think could be the most negative thing that could happen for an employer if many of them continue to force employees back to work in the office?
I think turnover could be a negative impact, and turnover is always the kiss of death for any organization. You don't want that. Talk about something that's not productive, of having to rehire folks and get them trained up to speed
Right.
with 6 months of downtime. And but I think this is an important enough issue for people that they will seek out those opportunities and those employers that are a bit more progressive in terms of their approach to remote work. And so that's something that you really don't want as a part of your organization. The other thing I think is a negative impact to employers is employees may stay. They may come into the office, but you will not get any more from them than just 8 hours a day. If that's what I'm here to do, that's what I'm here to do. And I've heard stories of folks, saying, "Oh, I didn't answer that call because I was off at 4:30, and you said that we could not work remotely, and so I wasn't working remotely." So you have that too. You have employees who are disengaged or not engaged. They'll do what they're hired to do, and that's it. And in order to be able to move the needle in any organization, you need someone that is engaged and that's giving 120% versus just 100%. And so that's the other danger, is that you have someone who is disengaged. There has been a breach of trust, and the relationship has been damaged because now people feel like there has been a benefit takeaway that is occurring now without respect to
What's a
what the
punishment?
impact of them.
I mean, if you have worked so hard through 2020 to kind of get your life in order, your work in order, whether you had children that you are, or seniors that you were providing care for, or whatever your challenge was to figure out how to work remotely, and you made it work. And now it's kind of a punishment to say, okay, you did it then, but guess what? We don't think you're going to be able to do it now. So you have to come back. And I agree with you. Turnover is going to be impacted by this. I think employee happiness is going to be impacted by this. And we have to consider those two things when we talk about growth, when we talk about contribution, productivity. And you can't take those away and say, well, productivity would be better. We know for a fact, based on studies, that when an employee is happy and loyal, productivity soars. And what causes an employee to be happy and loyal is when they feel that the employer cares about them, when they feel the employer is putting their needs first when it comes to taking care of business. Are we taking, and you can tell the organization, I mean, we know revenue is directly tied to employee satisfaction when employees are happy, right? So
It is.
it's interesting. A couple of comments that came in. One said, from Andrew Mead, said, "This is spot on, and I was walking my dog while listening." So I love this. Another one, agree 100% on tradition. One size doesn't fit all. Some roles are conducive to remote work and others are not. People can understand that, and it's not ideal to create a blanket in-office policy for all. And that goes back to stating you can reduce the amount of space you lease or buy or have or hold, right? You don't have to have enough for every single employee. You could have a large meeting room where everybody comes in, like you suggested, once a month, twice a month, whatever, to have team time.
Mhm.
Another organization should consider providing remote work from home if they have the flexibility of it. Getting engaged doesn't necessarily mean someone be present physically in today's technological world. However, at times it becomes necessary to ask the employees to return to office because of few other employees who take advantage. I don't know if I agree with that. There may be people who take advantage of it, but their work is going to show that.
And
Their
you know
work,
what I would say? I would say address those employees directly then.
yes,
Versus having a blanket sort of, okay, Joe and Tom, they abuse the policy, so now everyone has to come in. Let's address Joe and Tom and do some coaching here or whatever needs to be done to get them up to speed. But let's not penalize everyone if something is otherwise working for them. And it's important to say that let's create opportunities for people to come into the office. I would say I like for that managers still have control. A part of the work from home policy could be you can work from home, for these number of days, unless your manager requires you to come into the office for a team builder or something like that, and then work with the managers to build situations and parameters around what would you require someone to come into the office for. And again, I encourage employers to let's give it a try. Let's try something between creating something between having everybody come back into the office and that's just it. Let's try to reframe it and think of other ways that we can have that engagement, have people in the office, and have a happy employee population at the same time. There's something. The solution is not everybody come back to the office or you're fired kind of thing. There's something
right.
in between that we should be looking at.
So I think the ideal then is going to be individual, case by case. I mean, you have to consider your employee base, you have to consider the work that's being done, the productivity that has already taken place, and also, of course, the employer needs have to be met too, right? So I'm really happy that we were able to talk about this today. I don't think we can pinpoint an ideal, like I said. So, do you have any last thoughts, William, before we get away?
My last thought is I'm encouraging employers to, again, think about it on a deeper level, engage your employees in this decision to figure out what's important to them. I know business is business and you have to meet those objectives, but if those objectives have been met and your employees have exceeded their productivity goals, in most cases they have, let's look at a different way to work. Let's reframe it and look at a different way to sort of meet the employees' needs while also meeting the employer's needs. And so it's worth some additional thought rather than sort of a blanket mandate to get
This
back
is
to the
what we're
office at
doing.
this date.
This is what we're doing. Right.
Yes. And
Right.
there are different ways to use the space. I know that it takes a lot to retrofit a space. A lot of people say, turn in a residential space. That's very difficult to do, and it's very expensive to do. Some employees don't have that option to do that. But there's different ways to use that space as well for the benefit of your employees that you can consider versus having everybody come back to the office and take that seat because we need to use that space. I just have not heard a whole lot of compelling reasons to.
Or seeing the data.
Yes. Yes.
There's been no data provided to you that proves this is a necessity.
Actually, there hasn't been. All of the data supports that people tend to be more productive. Of course, there is some of that, again, social isolation that some people are working, too much. That can be managed. But that's what the data supports. And I don't think enough attention is being paid to that. And so I just encourage employers to engage your employees in the decision before you do it. And let's be a little bit more creative, put together a committee or someone to give a little bit more thought on how to use that space and how to engage the employees so that people don't feel penalized for having to come into the office. Yeah.
Yeah. And one last comment I'd like to make, and please respond if you have a comment on it. But one of the things that I know, one of the situations that I know have benefited from work from home is those that have disabilities. those that maybe have some type of anxiety, or like myself, I have ADHD. And so sitting at a desk all day does not help me. It doesn't help me. And I need to get up and walk around and do whatever I need to do. And many office situations are not helpful. They don't want you doing that. They don't want you walking around and disrupting other people, or like my one employer that said, do not stop and talk to anybody that's walking. So it is, I think, again, it's going to be, of course, a case by case thing, but we need to consider every employee type, and see what works best for those employees, and what type of diversity do you want to embrace for your company, for your organization. And that's really a big consideration right now when we talk about diversity, when it has been at the forefront of conversations for the last few years, should have been forever. But, it seems to be something we're talking about more. And on top of that, some diversity roles are being eliminated. So we're going to miss opportunities to help employees who are marginalized and don't feel like their needs are being met, because those departments are being eliminated or reduced, and so I think we're going to see negative effects ultimately.
Yes. You want to increase your candidate pool, offer remote work. An option for remote work, and you've done it just like that, and you have like you said, you have access to a more diverse population of folks that aren't able to commute for some reason, but are very, very good, at what they do remotely. And so at this point, the data supports it's just a better working situation all the way around. And so I just encourage employers to consider it where it is possible, and where it works, to give it a try.
Couple last comments. Employees who take advantage should be addressed individually instead of penalizing everyone.
Yes.
Supporting your comment. Also, another comment, it may be harder for leaders to manage outcomes versus face time, but this shift is long overdue. And I have to agree with that. My guest today has been William Wiggins. Thank you so much, William. You're a senior consultant with Swift HR Solutions, correct?
I'm a senior consultant with Swift HR Solutions. And so for employers out there that don't know what to do about this problem, give us a call.
Great. Swift HR Solutions. William is also author of the newly released book, Humane Resources, Bridging the Gap Between People and Profits.
Yes.
And how can people buy your book?
It's out on Amazon. You can do a search for Humane Resources or William Wiggins, and it is out there ready for the reading. Reasonably priced, because I feel that the subject matter that's in there is important enough where I really, really want everyone to benefit from it. And it's not just for employers; it's also for employees as well. And I like to think there's a bit of a humor component to the book and a personal component to the book, because again, I associate HR policies and best practices with real life stories that I have experience in HR, and so it gives more of a context when you are.
Again, I'll go back to what a great storyteller you are, and everybody loves to read great stories. So I hope folks that are listening will look up the book, purchase it, read it, share it. If you come across an idea that you think your employer would benefit from, or a fellow HR professional, please share it. Thank you again, William, for joining me today. Always a pleasure. And I can't wait to come back to you once I've finished reading your book.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it.
It's a pleasure. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time on The Edge.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.